Hi, I'm John Gagne. I'm the author of Misguided Patriots. And the book Misguided Patriots is about my parents' secret CIA lives. And there are a lot of things in the book that kind of relate back to the JFK assassination. And although the book is finished and already published, I just recently discovered some really crazy stuff that I wanted to share. It's not in the book, but it relates to stuff in the book. And what happened was a friend of mine created this website called jfkrecords.org, and on jfkrecords.org, it's got like all the JFK documents, assassination documents, in a searchable AI database where it's like super fast and you can search anything you want, and it's new. And I was just playing around with it. And I'll warn you right now that this video is mostly for older people. You know, if you're not 50 or 60 years old, you're not going to remember some of these people. But so in the book and in real life, my mom and dad happened to be at Fort Clark the weekend, which Fort Clark is an old military base in Texas that was bought in the late 40s by Brown and Root in a deal that Lyndon Johnson arranged for Brown and Root. And Brown and Root's a big defense contractor that later in 1963 got acquired by Halliburton. So Brown and Root and Halliburton are the same thing. Anyway, there's this former military base called Fort Clark, and it's down by Del Rio, down close to the border, and my parents happened to be there on the weekend that Oswald was supposed to be in Mexico right before the assassination. So it was the end of September, and the assassination was in November of '63. And because of that, it was just like a suspicious trip. It was an odd place for them to go. My parents are both from the East Coast, and they're like went to prep school and fancy colleges, and just being out of that fort just was a really weird thing, not to mention they were CIA. So I've just continued to look into that, and there are some stories about a meeting that took place there supposedly in that time frame that involved LBJ, that was like a planning meeting for the assassination. So that whole thing interests me. So long story short, I get on this jfkrecords.org, and I'm searching Fort Clark, Del Rio, just finding some more information about that. Like I said, the book's already finished. And so as I'm searching, I find this CIA document, and this CIA document talks about this radio station called XERF back in 1963 that is on the Mexican side of the border in Acuna, which is right across from Del Rio, which is right next to Fort Clark. And this CIA document was produced like, or it's an FBI, actually, it's an FBI document that was classified and recently declassified as part of the JFK files. And in this document, it talked about this XERF radio station that operated at extremely high power on the other side of the border, and it was broadcasting all the way across the United States, all the way through Canada, and it was way more powerful than anything that was permitted in the United States. And it said in there that it was owned by a guy named Jaffe, that is an organized crime figure that actually owned the Tropicana nightclub, and was co-owned by him and this guy named Gonzalez in Mexico, who was a member of Fair Play for Cuba. So, you know, I don't know how much you know these assassination theories, but, you know, they're always linking the mafia and these Fair Play for Cuba guys, that Oswald was part of that organization. And so it's really interesting that they discovered this radio station was co-owned by mafia guys who are supposed to be anti-communist, and this communist guy connected to Fair Play for Cuba. And so when I read this brief little report, and it says in there they decided it was nothing, it didn't mean anything. Of course, nothing they discovered meant anything. So I start researching XERF, and when I start researching this radio station XERF, what I find out right away is that's where Wolfman Jack, if you know who Wolfman Jack is, you know. If you don't know, I guess you don't know. But he was in American Graffiti, and he was a very popular disc jockey that broadcast from this radio station in Acuna all the way across the country, where most radio stations could only hit, a local area. He was broadcasting all across the United States and Canada, and so Wolfman Jack was at this XERF, and I thought, well, that's freaking interesting. I didn't know he was at a foreign radio station. So I start researching Wolfman Jack, and when I start looking into Wolfman Jack, I find out that he actually was trained at the National Broadcasting College in Washington, D.C. And so I start looking into this college where he's being trained. Oh, this is interesting. Doesn't seem like a normal place that you would train for broadcasting. And when I look up this college, it's literally adjacent to the White House. When you step off of the White House grounds, you're just a couple of steps away from being at this broadcasting college. And I thought, well, that's really interesting too. And of course, that's only like a mile or two away from CIA headquarters. My parents are CIA, so this is all very interesting to me. So I start following what happened to Wolfman Jack after he graduated. And after he graduated, he goes down to the shipyards in Virginia, Norfolk, and right in the middle of all this Spook Central and back then, Navy intelligence and all that. This is in like 61 or something like that, and that's his first gig, is right in the middle of all this military stuff. Now I'm really starting to get suspicious. He goes from there and he goes down to Louisiana, where he stays for a brief time, and then my animals are driving me crazy. I'm sorry about the camera bouncing. My cat is playing with the camera from the other side. So he goes to Louisiana. He's in Louisiana for a short time, and then shortly after the assassination, so the JFK assassination is the 22nd of November. My parents have been down there in that area around Del Rio in September. So there's CIA presence down there with my parents at least. You've got these mafia guys that are running that radio station, and in mid-December, so it's now 2 to 3 weeks after the JFK assassination, all of a sudden Wolfman Jack and another guy stage a takeover of XERF. They go in there and by force take over XERF. There's a labor dispute going on supposedly at XERF. That's the way the story goes. And Wolfman Jack goes in there and takes over XERF. And I thought, that is freaking crazy. So Wolfman Jack appears to me at this point to be CIA and connected, to the White House effectively. And he's gone in shortly after the assassination in this area that was, I guess the other thing I didn't mention is that there were the reason why the FBI was investigating in the first place to get this information about Del Rio was that there were actually reports to the FBI in San Antonio that Oswald had been sighted in Del Rio when he was supposed to be in Mexico City. So, and plus you got this fair play from Cuba guy there, and apparently a lot of stuff is going on that may be connected to the JFK assassination, which is also connected to this radio station. And all of a sudden this apparent surprise CIA guy, Wolfman Jack, goes in there and takes over the radio station mid-December. And if that's not enough, as you read about it, he doesn't just take it. They don't just take it over. They take it over and they surround it with barbed wire and sandbags, and they militarily reinforce this radio station. And then in mid-January, just a month after Wolfman Jack takes it over, a group of armed guys with machine guns, like they say somewhere between 10 and 20 guys in these news articles, take over or attempt to take it back from Wolfman Jack. So they have this armed attack with about 20 guys with machine guns and shit that come in and stage an attack, an armed attack on XERF, trying to take it back from Wolfman Jack. None of this have I ever heard before. And I watched Wolfman Jack all the time. The Midnight Special he did in the 70s. He was on TV every weekend night with a different band, you know, and I never pictured this. So, and supposedly Wolfman Jack is there with his guys, and they're having a gunfight with these guys that are trying to take the radio station back, and it ends up, for somehow, the Mexican police and Mexican army get together and go over there and help Wolfman Jack fend off these attackers. So now you got the Mexican government helping Wolfman Jack, who's taken over this radio station, which you would think that the Mexicans wouldn't be too happy about this American intelligence guy coming over and taking over the radio station, but they go in and help him repel this attack. And then Wolfman Jack stays there broadcasting all across the United States and Canada for years after that. And to me, that is the craziest freaking story. I'm just shocked. I just never, I just would never have thought that of Wolfman Jack. So for all you old people like me, hopefully that's an interesting story. And buy my book, Misguided Patriots. Thank you, guys.